Welcome to Postscript. Here we hope to answer your questions and help you dig deeper into the messages and sermons at Faithbridge by talking with the teacher of the day.
Hello, my name is Adam McIntire, and welcome to Postscript. I am here with Pastor Ken Werlein, who just finished part 2 of the Unshakeable series. Pastor Ken, thank you so much for being here with us today. Sure. And so in your sermon today, you talked about how Daniel reacted to King Nebuchadnezzar's decree to go out and kill all of the wise men. And so specifically, you talked about how we are to respond in times of crisis. And so with Daniel, he responded with tact and wisdom, which got him an audience with the king. And then he, through prayer, was able to actually interpret. God was able to give him the answers to interpret King Nebuchadnezzar's dreams. Yeah. And so could you elaborate just a little bit on what that dream was about?
What the dream was, yeah, because we didn't have time for it. And it's long. You got to spend about 10 minutes to get through the rest of chapter 2. The long and the short of it is, though, that the king saw this great image, this colossus, which is going to tie in very nicely to where we're going next week with chapter 3. But anyhow, he sees this huge statue, and it's divided into 4 sections. At the top, you have the head of gold, and the chest and arms were of silver, and then the belly and the thighs of brass, and then the legs of iron with its feet mingled with iron and clay. And so that's what you'll read. And then Daniel begins to explain, now here's what it means. And this is the part that Nebuchadnezzar was not happy to hear. Basically, Daniel says, all right, king, so you and Babylon, you are that head of gold. Congratulations. But then Daniel says, but after you, and it's at that point, the king was like, after me? What? Yeah. There's something coming. Yes, there's something coming after you. And so then we move, down the statue. He says there's a kingdom that's come. Most people believe that was clearly the Medes and the Persians who would conquer the Babylonians after 70 years. And then after them, yet another king and another kingdom, and that would be Alexander the Great and the Greeks that would come in. And then working all the way down, there'll be yet another kingdom that will come, and who will conquer the Greeks. Of course, that's the Romans. And so now, the interesting thing about it is, though, he's calling attention to the feet of clay, and it's here that this great stone is going to come and obliterate the whole statue. And of course, that's the rock of Christ, as Peter would say. I jotted down the verse, 1 Peter 2:4, the living stone that others rejected. Here was this stone. Daniel was already prophesying, and it would be his kingdom that would stand forever. No other kingdoms are going to stand forever, but his would. So there it is in a nutshell. You can read through and imagine in your mind Nebuchadnezzar listening to this whole thing when he thought, I'm the greatest, right. And people who think they're the greatest tend to forget there will be something that comes after you.
Absolutely. Yeah, God's kingdom still reigns to this day and will continue to reign. And so, and in your sermon, you really emphasize prayer and how essential that is to respond to crisis with prayer. Right. And so a lot of people have found it very helpful to keep prayer journals. Can you speak to the benefits of keeping a prayer journal?
I love journaling. And one of the biggest benefits for me is that it keeps my mind from being distracted. Yeah. If I'm not writing, or now I tend to have my devotional times, my quiet times with my laptop, and I can type faster than I can write. Either way, I find that when I'm praying while writing or typing, I just stay so much more focused on what I'm supposed to be talking to the Lord about.
Right.
When I try free-form prayer, especially if it's early in the morning and I'm still a little groggy, the next thing I know, I'm thinking about I need to get the oil changed on the car, and I forgot to do this yesterday, and I probably better make a dental appointment for the kids, or and I'm not praying anymore.
Right.
And so keeping a journal, I think, is particularly helpful for that reason. Secondly, it's particularly helpful and inspiring because you can look back and see, look what God has done. Turn back 6 months, turn back a year, turn back 5 years. Look at what God has done. And so I have a file cabinet of journals that go back now close to 30 years. Wow. That I can see what I was wrestling through and where God has come through and provided. And then for the past several years, like I said, I started doing it on my laptop, but I can access that as well. One other benefit, but I don't have time to really talk about all of this, and that is I think that there's benefit in actually journaling about our whole devotional time, including the scriptural portion. And that's where I would refer people to the SOAP acrostic that I particularly enjoy using in devotions. And I think we have a message online that people can access about doing devotions.
Well,
the SOAP acrostic.
Absolutely, and I imagine too that it helps even in just giving perspective, because like you said, you can go back and you can look back 30 years, Absolutely. And you can see that, oh man, this prayer took 15 years for it to be answered, and so I'm being really impatient now, but I've seen God answer prayers in all kinds of different time frames, sure. And so it can help with our patience as well. And so speaking of that, Absolutely. I know that there are a lot of people who they are praying fervently and they still have not heard an answer from God, and so they're patiently waiting and they're hoping for God to respond. Sure. Do you have any words of advice for those people who are waiting patiently to hear from God?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember hearing a sermon years ago, and I've preached it, in which the pastor said, really there's 4 answers that the Lord always gives. And it's kind of rhymey and cutesy, but there's truth in this, and I think it's helpful. Sometimes he says no, and the door closes, or the funeral happens, and we just have to trust in God's great plan. Okay, this was a no. He's seeing from a higher perspective than we're seeing, and it's not what we wanted, but it's a no, and we'll trust He's in control. He's good. He's gracious. He's loving. He knows what's best. Sometimes it's no. Sometimes it's slow, meaning not a no, and it may well be a yes, but it's going to be a while, because sometimes, especially when you're looking back at old prayers that you've prayed, you say, look at that, because before that could happen, this had to happen, and this person had to do that, and in God's great plan, there was actually something going on. And so that's why he was saying essentially slow. And then yet another one, sometimes God says grow, because sometimes the work needs to happen inside of us. It's not that the request is wrong, it's that we're wrong. Right. Something's not right in our spirit, and the Lord's saying, I'm going to wait on you till your spirit's right, until you're letting me work inside you satisfactorily, and then we'll move on. So sometimes it's grow, and then sometimes it's go. And that's your green light, and that's the answer. So to the person who's in this holding pattern, right, not unlike the one that I was in, that I illustrated with 17 years ago, or a handful of people who came up and talked to me after the service that I got to pray with a few of, who are there right now. And at the risk of being too cutesy, because I certainly don't want to do that or minimize, but I think there really is truth in that. Okay, well, if it's not a no, and that door hasn't closed, but it's not a yes yet, then it's either God's at work doing something, it's a slow, or maybe we need to ask God, is there something still more that you want to do inside of me? Is there something that I need to surrender, or some sin I need to confess, or something that's not right with me that I need to give over to you. And but otherwise, then we have to wait, and that's the not fun part. Just trusting and hanging on and saying, okay, Lord, I know that you're good, and I know you can do anything. You're the King of all kings. You're the Lord of all time. So I'm trusting, and I'll just wait.
Absolutely. That's incredibly helpful. And especially if the answer happens to be slow or grow, I'd imagine that's why it's so important to be plugged into community.
Absolutely. Because then you've got people who are with you, and they're taking the journey with you. And it's so fortifying when we're walking through a valley to not have to walk through that valley alone.
Absolutely.
But, well, of course, we always have the Lord, but to have some people with some skin on them that you can hold hands with and pray with and laugh with and cry with, and there's nothing like it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Ken, for being with us today, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks for joining us for Postscript. Help us keep the podcast interactive by submitting your questions during the morning services. Learn more at faithbridge.org/postscript.